Hey everybody, welcome back to the Spin Rack. I'm here with my boys PD and Cal. Say what's up, gents.
What's going on?
Hey,
Hey,
we're ready to rock.
Cal was doing his research and he was able to find this thing on Instagram about why Marvel has been failing lately. And the videos on this are not necessarily shocking, but it's intriguing to find out that we've uncovered this stuff. So I'll let Cal walk us through this as we after we watch these videos. So
All right, so
select a
we'll
play.
let it play twice, just so you hear the first part again.
Very steeped in the comics.
I didn't read any comics or do any research.
I wasn't familiar with comics. I wasn't familiar with the movies.
We didn't lean into a whole lot of the history of the comic books.
Yeah, candidly, we were not enormous comic fans.
I wasn't super into superhero comics when I was a kid. I read a lot of like indie press stuff.
First thing I was told is don't read the comics.
Really?
As a creator, they put you in a bubble. They don't let you talk about any of the other projects, right?
You know, they're up for anything.
We ultimately decided to redefine it for the series and thought that it worked better for the story that we're trying to tell.
Did you ever read you never read the comic?
When the DVD comes out, I'm going to read a Thor comic book and just see where we went wrong. One of these days.
Honestly, I was not very steeped in the comics.
I didn't read any comics or do any research.
I wasn't familiar with comics. I wasn't familiar with the movies.
We didn't lean into a whole lot of the history of the comic books.
Yeah, candidly, we were not enormous comic fans.
I wasn't super into superhero comics when I was a kid. I read a lot of like indie press stuff.
First thing I was told is don't read the comics.
Really? As a creator, they put you in a bubble. They don't let you talk about any of the other projects, right?
You know, they're up for anything.
We ultimately decided to redefine it for the series and thought that it worked better for the story that we're trying to tell.
Did you ever?
All right.
So Cal, can you give us a little background on this? How you found it? What's your take on it?
My boy Professor CA forwarded it to me. You know, he sends a lot of stuff throughout the week. You know, and some things that are topical can use for the show. But this is something we've discussed. I mean, I've discussed this with you guys individually, discussed with Professor CA, we've discussed it collectively. But when we look at the quality, even if you just look at the most recent series, something like Echo, and you wonder why this is not clicking. And then they're telling you, where this character came from, the source material, what made this character resonate. We're not reading it or paying any attention to it. We're just going to pretty much take the shell and craft the story that we want to tell and then wonder why it sucks. Hey, look at What If. What If was a sham. That was a sham show that promoted only the characters that the creator and producer liked. That was it. The new characters they created, the Captain Carter version or analog, if you will, Doctor Strange, new Native American character. That's it. It was for them, you know, and everybody else was window dressing. But these were the characters that gave the universe life to begin with. So now they're just sitting there and telling us what a lot of us had already theorized. You know, hey, we don't read this stuff. What was I thought was even more telling was that when Josh Whedon was there, he burned himself out being on all the sets because he wanted to make sure that all this stuff tied together. Now, the guy who's working on Falcon and Winter Soldier is saying, oh, they put you in a bubble, so you're just working on this. You have no idea what's going on with the other stuff. So that whole idea of an interconnected universe isn't even there. Or they don't want these guys to be to have any say in how this stuff connects. So you can see, you definitely see where this thing ran off the rails. I couldn't imagine seeing a video like this around 2008, 2012, where we're like, oh, we don't read this stuff, or where he's the amount of hubris with this guy. Yeah, maybe I'll go read a comic and find out where we went wrong. That's where you went wrong. You're too big. You feel that you're too big to read a comic. And these characters have been around for decades. And not just that they've been around for decades, they have been around successfully for decades. They have been around in serialized format. This is continuous storytelling over the course of a number of authors for decades. You know, and then continuously published, continuously in print, and you know, they just totally dismiss it. They know better because hey, it's a comic book.
Well, the hard part, if you watch the Marvel movies, and the hard part is for them to say this, to be on these projects, and at the same time, I look at these things and I say, some of these bits are from the comic books, but they're so mixed up that someone threw it in the pool and someone used it, but at the same time, these guys don't even know with it, Taiki Watiki doesn't know that there are comic book elements in his Thor movies, like the God Butcher is in the story, the executioner with the guns is in the story, the Hela Thor going to hell and having a thing where she injures them and scars them and that sort of thing. All that stuff is in the it was saying Thor holding up Loki and the hammer coming back and saying it's going to crush you if you don't take this spell off of everybody. All that stuff from the comic, but the fact that they don't know that is an even more glaring problem. Whereas like some of the bits that the hard part is the bits that work, you can go off the path, like say that people have done all the time. Hollywood changes everything, but if you're in the project, you don't even know that some of these elements of the WandaVision, right? Now, WandaVision isn't exactly like the miniseries, but they were in a suburban home in there and she had kids, right? So they did a whole remix of that sort of thing. So it had the core aspect that she has kids and she's going through this thing in this pregnancy. So they did a wacky version of that. But the core element is from the comic book. So the person who's at WandaVision doesn't know that there was a series that went and they were in this suburban place in New Jersey and all this other stuff that happened. And Agatha Harkness is a part of it that helps, like all of those bits. And it's like what the comic creators used to call the illusion of change, is saying all the elements are here. It's just not as you remember. And they don't even know that. So there's been a history of being able to change stuff, where you have like the Batman series where the person did a camp thing with it, but it had a lot of core elements of the comic book in here. The Batman being a great escape artist, Batman being a detective, but they played it all for jokes. But at the same time, you have this core of this. When you get to the Batman movie, Sam Hamm has kind of put some of the key elements in there, whereas Tim Burton, we also know that he was telling people not to read the comic books. We have Bryan Singer, even though Chris McQuarrie put in a lot of comic book elements in the X-Men, he's telling the actors not to read the comic books. And it's just like, it's really, I don't even know if you could say the irony of having comic book elements in these movies and plot lines and stories. And then when you get to Secret Invasion, you don't use any of that stuff. That's when you say we're totally off the rails. We've totally lost everything because we don't have the original Nick Fury. We can't use superheroes. So in my mind, if you're gonna do Secret Invasion, can you at least use Fury trying to figure out which agents of Shield are now Skrulls? No, we can't even use Agents of Shield because that's what Whedon and that crew. So it's just tough to see elements of comic book stuff in there, and these writers not even be able to see that aspect in the stuff they're working on. That someone put on the board bits from the comic book and they don't even know that's from the comic books.
Well, I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate here, right?
Of course.
So Nate Moore, there was a saying from Nate Moore, who is one of the top producers in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he was a comic fan. He did read comics and stuff like that, but he said, I think in one of the articles, that being I only quote this. I'm not sure if it's legit, but I'm just gonna go rock with it at the moment. That he says, being a huge comic book fan, could be a red flag, right? Because what he really wants is someone to be hard.
Wait.
Can I finish what I'm going to say?
I can't let you. A comic book fan is a red flag on our show. That's what we're doing here.
I'm saying what the
What are we doing here? All right, finish.
I'm
saying I'm giving you the rope. You're losing the rope now, so keep going.
I'm just trying to explain the situation. Okay,
keep going. All right.
I agree with it. I'm not saying I'm going with it. I'm just
okay. Well, you said on our show, somebody got to say something.
Well, Nate Moore was the one who brought Black Panther. Okay, so come on. He read all the comics. He said he used to read it as a kid, but he's saying that the thing is he wants to make sure that there's someone who the writers take the time to push hard on the material. And that's a legitimate thing. If you got writers who understand the craft of writing, telling a good story, it doesn't, you're right. It's not cool to have the title where you trick everybody and say, hey, this is Echo, and then you put window dressing, because everybody thinks the window dressing, oh my God, this is what Echo is going to do. And in reality, it's a completely different story. If you're going to do a completely different story, then do it. But there are also examples of successful shows that did hew closely, or shows that did hew closely to the material, and then they didn't come out as pop. It come out as well as they could have. You know, there are also those shows that didn't have much with the material and were pretty successful. So there's a balance that you have to somehow strike, where you have to definitely have enough of a enough of the comic in it, to at least whet the appetites of those who read those comics and follow those characters, and also bring up new things for people to make it much more accessible. So we have to understand there is a balance. And one of the things that
Oh,
Marvel has been fantastic at doing, once again, Feige and his crew, that they have, constantly had the talent and insight and foresight to bring
oh,
that
you
blend of comics and openness for the general culture to have. That's all I'm trying to say. I understand it. I'm not saying it's right. I think any literate person should at least have read the comic. Any
oh,
writer should
look.
have read it.
I'm saying if you have a concept like Blade, right, where you look at the comic book and they did an update in Blade, but when we saw the movie version, even the update can't compare to Wesley Snipes and what they did to with the thing. But the core is still the stuff that was it Goyer was able to keep the core stuff in there. So saying, hey, the look needs to be updated. This stuff, we got this wacky thing with Silver, but nobody cares because we know it's cool. Like we know the swords and all the stuff is cool. He named Blade, where I think he had wooden, it's like stakes, but they were wooden blades type of thing to go along with the thing. They go on with silver, extra silver and whatnot. It's like nobody cares. So it's like you can do that stuff, but then as you go further, you can say, okay, the Fantastic Four stuff, wasn't blockbuster. It was close to the comics. It's kind of the softer, more like comedic aspects to it. But at the same time, you look at the stuff where they had a plot for the X-Men that was more like like superhero type of thing, and they kind of went to the darker stuff with um with having Magneto's history, and that kind of resonated with the fans. So having the comic history was something that was successful, and at the same time, while it's successful, you have comic book guys like Josh Whedon doing the yellow spandex line. So it's always easy to kind of denigrate the comic books. And that's why I cut into what you're saying. So you have to remember that we have successful comic books. We have Spider-Man. And when we see, who's it, James Cameron, most of his plot line, his pitch, which was like his treatment was like 60 pages. The big change was that he had organic webbing, and that was going to be his kind of, like going to puberty of understanding this webbing type of thing. And I'm only saying I wasn't with it, but it's like most of the core stuff, Aunt May, that losing Uncle Ben, those elements are in there. So it's like that's what you're trying to have to remember. So when you get to the Echo, it's like, do we have anything? But Echo seems to be like a cool character, but it's in a successful plot. Like, why do you need to go in and change this stuff? The Secret Invasion was successful. It was like, we're going to turn into a Cold War spy show. Like, why?
I agree with you. Look, I totally agree with you with Secret Invasion. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Because you didn't like it. There's the ones you don't like, you say it doesn't work. It's like, hey, that didn't work. I didn't like it, so it didn't work. But it's like,
Look, you know what? Let's give Cal a second, because I don't want you to dominate the whole conversation. Cal, you got 5 seconds. Tell us what you think.
Out of your mind. I'm gonna take 5 seconds and another 55 minutes on top of that. Well, everything that's saying PD is saying is correct. Okay. To add to that, same thing I was saying before. These people have no respect for the source material. They think these characters are silly, if not stupid. Just look at Echo. Echo is probably one of the most down to earth types of characters you can work with. She's street level, and you could have done a whole bunch of stuff with the fact that she's deaf. She's also what is it? I think she also has a prosthetic leg. So there's a whole bunch of things that you could have written into that, and you could have played up some clever stuff. But they decided, no, we're going to go our own route, and then it becomes more of like an origin story and her reconnecting with her Native American roots. We haven't even gotten to see her really do anything. The first episode was almost like a recap, and then you have to stop and say, okay, you actually have some stuff with her in the comics that you could have tagged to. Why did you do this? Oh, this is a story you wanted to tell. What was the story that you wanted to tell? You didn't want to tell any story. You don't think this character is viable. You don't think this character really has anything to offer. This is a job, and in order for you to get through it, you held your nose, punched up some story that you thought would actually work, and you said, "Here, you guys, go ahead, love it. They'll love it. All we got to do is give them some action scenes, give them a few Savate kit, they'll be, as long as we keep it with the generic superhero stuff and make sure we check all of those boxes, everything will be just fine. And that's the reason why these latest batches of things that we've been getting in terms of film and TV haven't been very good. Even the animation sucks. And with the animation, usually you can do whatever you want. You can always draw whatever you like, and even there, they're still not coming up. They're still not coming up to snuff.
So I want to add to that portion because they introduced a new Native American character, and I watched the beginning of it, and they have a point where these characters are being attacked, and then one of the female characters, she comes in to save the day, and she gets hit.
Where's she from?
I don't know. The Native American character, the Indian character that's in there, the one with the new superhero they created.
Are you talking about the one from What If?
What If? Yeah, What If? Yeah. So,
great character.
huh?
Great
No,
character.
I'm not. Look at this. The problem is that the origin is the same origin from the Monica Rambeau thing. But Monica Rambeau was actually going to stop this guy using his interdimensional energy. She goes to the boat. She figures a way. She finesses her way to get on the boat. She figures out where the problem is. She was like, wait a second, he got this interdimensional thing. I got to stop it. She goes in, hits it, not a soft, I got to try it. She's like, nah, I'm just breaking this thing. She immediately gets transported like who knows how far. She gains the power and gets shot off. And the same story bit, same story beats are in there. So it's like, why couldn't we get that? Someone sitting around and saying, this is cool. Why can't we use this? And it's just like the whole idea where Quesada was talking about a sandbox, but taking the Marvel sandbox and saying, well, we're going to have Monica, who has light powers, do superhero landings, boom. And it's like, it's light powers. So when we have this new character they created, they use all the bits from Monica, where it was just so, I read that as a kid, where she goes in, she hits the interdimensional thing, that she's connected to the power, and she's just shot to the other end of the other city. And then she wakes up and she's like, how did I get here? And she's ultimately has these powers, but she doesn't notice she's using them at first. And then slowly she's like, oh, I got to get in the costume. I got to get a dress. I'm next to all this Mardi Gras stuff.
Are you saying that they read the comic and they just transferred the?
You can't call it plagiarizing because it's in the same company. They're in the company.
They read the comic. They didn't read the comic, and they just came up with they just figured out the same concept.
Yes, if they had, and it was everyone loved this character and how she got her powers. And it was like that could have been a great Monica moment. So you're just sitting around there putting this taking it, put it on your board for your writers and say, I want this for a character. You know, I'm going to use this for my What If. What? A totally new character. Why? Because we already did Monica differently. So she's like the daughter and all this other stuff. She's going to just, they had her going through the thing with, what's the name? So I was just looking for that moment, but then they stole it and put it in What If. So I'm just tired of seeing them take bits, not say that they don't read the comic books, and then at the same time, we see all the comic book stuff in these movies and be like, at least Christopher McQuarrie said, hey, he was saying to Bryan Singer when he got the X-Men, and he's like, these guys have been movie guys, and like saying they weren't big comic book guys. Like, Bryan, we're not comic book guys. And he's like, no, I want you to write it. So he wrote it, and he went to the comic books and added the elements in there. Had in the story, I think Storm is in Africa early in the first one that he wrote in the first draft, and they got rid of that stuff. So it's like, but at the same time, even him, like the same instance of the guy who did what's the name, Wrath of Khan, Howard Burnett. Like he was a Mission Impossible, no, not a $6 Million Man. So they gave him Star Trek. They were unhappy with Gene Roddenberry and what he did with the first movie. So they gave it to Howard Burnett, and he went through the whole series. And he was just like, okay, I'm taking Khan, right? And I like the naval thing that was kind of happening with the balance of terror. Let me put that in there, and we got a movie using the elements from the thing, so we get a sequel that's connected to the series. In the same instance, when Mr. McQuarrie comes in there, Christopher McQuarrie comes in there, puts together, reads the comics, and puts them in there. And when he talks about it, he talks about remembering in the comic books, Magneto, was in Auschwitz. So that stuff is saying, I'm connecting it to the comic book, so you can go back and say, hey, maybe I should read those comic books. Not like these guys. They're involved stuff that has stuff from, like was it Black Widow has characters that the Black Widow is connected to, like I forget the Red Guardian and that sort of thing. Those characters, they're in there. They're from the comic book. They just made their whole own story into the whole thing. But it's like it's utilizing stuff and bits from the comic books and saying, nope, we didn't read the comic books at all. It's just totally disrespectful. I'm sorry, I'm going another tirade. So I'm going to
No, they listen. No, you got it. And when they say
you're
it
not,
with pride.
you don't
They
accept
say
the
it with
apology.
pride. We didn't read that. We didn't read those comic books. We didn't read that. What do we look like to you? We didn't read those. We didn't read that stuff. No, we came up with our own stuff. No, this is a story we wanted to tell. We don't got to read that trash.
the when we got to them, like
You know what?
the
You can have someone write, and you guys should know this. You can have someone write the basis of a movie, and then you can have someone else come in and say, "Hey, all right, these are the facts of the comic books," and say, "Hey, input those things into the movie based on the thing." They could do that. It's not a hard thing to do, right? You put an outline, you put the basis, the basis on, and then you have someone whose job it is to come thing. We have like this the Lucas what is it? I think this the Star Wars storyboard group where they actually check every single story that is done by um, ever done TV movies to make sure that it falls within the character, the continuity of the whole series. I don't know what Marvel is doing, but I would assume
Yeah,
they would have
we
something
talked about that.
like that.
We
Okay.
talked about that. See, when Lucasfilms does that, you know what that means? That means if you want to get your story passed, that means if you actually want to get this out there, you're probably better off reading the stuff yourself. Because if it's no, these guys have read it. So if you come over here and try to push this past, they're like, no, 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 this is no good. Darth Vader doesn't act like this. No, what are you talking about? No, no, no. Your new character, we already have a character like that. It's called Thrawn. You got to come up with something. Then you were like, oh, okay. I guess I got to read this stuff if I want to get the script across. I can't just, phone it. I can't just phone it in. So that you're better off reading it. But that's not what we're seeing over here with the Marvel Universe. It's more about at least right now, it's more about representation, checking boxes, and 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 making certain that the
And
DEI
making money.
score
Let's remember.
and making certain that the DEI score is as high as possible.
And look, it's made in Marvel and Disney are companies built on making money. Okay, no one's making money to lose money. No one's making movies to lose money. That makes no sense whatsoever. So
You
back to
make
your topic.
money.
Okay.
You make money in this field by putting behinds in seats.
Yes.
Okay, not by pandering to vocal groups who want to see stuff and they can give a damn whether or not the movie does well. They just want to see that there's a certain amount of representation, or they're going to look at the trailer and say, "Oh, that looks great. I'll catch it one day, maybe, on stream." You make money by putting people in the theater, okay, to pay money to actually want to see your stuff. They're not going about it that way.
I gotta say, I don't know. I don't know if I can agree with that. I don't think Marvel's intentionally doing something like that. But hey, let's wrap this up. I'll give a summary of what we just discussed so that people understand it a little clearer because you guys kind of put in all this jargon and try to confuse people with your thoughts. We think that what's going on, yes, is not clear for the average viewer, and that Marvel is trying their damnedest to try to get out a good product out there. And by doing that, not only do they take people who read comics, but they also take people who don't. And so we challenge, you know, Marvel to at least take a more proactive step in hiring more people who definitely want to read or who read and love the product that we like, that we love too.
No, sorry, no, you're going too light. Okay, you have stepping and pussyfooting around the subject. When they started these films, the majority of the people who were coming out to see them, because the majority of people aren't comic book readers, so the majority of the people who came out to see those films, they had no comic book, knowledge or experience when they got there, but they still enjoyed it. And those initial films tagged much more closely to the source material of the comic book. Now we're saying, oh, we don't need to do that because we don't want we want people to be able to come in and enjoy it. Well, hey, they tacked a lot more closely back then, and everybody came out and enjoyed it. So that is it's just a fallacy to even present that as an argument. If it's good, people tend to enjoy it. And here's the other thing: when it's good, people tend to be let back to the source material. Hey, wow, I just saw this movie with Sherlock Holmes. oh man, you know what? Why don't I go check out some of the stories? I enjoyed the movie. Maybe I'll enjoy the stories as well. Maybe I'll enjoy some other stuff, as opposed to, hey, I don't need to read any of this stuff. I'll just be happy with the movies, and that'll be the end of it. It used to be different. Like, hey, I saw Zorro. Okay, maybe I'll enjoy some Zorro comics. Oh wow, I like the comics too. Why? Because the comics, okay, the comics were the basis for the film. Oh, well, great. Well, I like the comics. Maybe I'll like the novel adaptation. Maybe I'll like some of these other novels, some of this. And before you know it, you got a lifelong Zorro fan. That's not what they want to do. We want to create our own little pocket universes and sell to this small demographic of guaranteed money and then complain why we can't expand the audience or why it is people are always bickering. They weren't bickering in 2008.
Well, I'm going to show you a basic thing. I understand when you look at things and you say, all right, here's the X-Men, here's 3 million ideas. And I think like X2 was kind of the closest, well, the best one as far for me. When it's just like, and I'm going into it saying, why would you start with, why would you work in Lady Deathstrike? I get it that she's cool. She's got adamantine claws, but she kind of has a wacky kind of bohemian outfit, which only, who's that guy? Only Barry Windsor Smith could draw. So it's like there's a lot of hurdles to get past. And what they did was basically streamlined it. Hey, she's in all black. You got a hottie to play the part, and then at the same time, they said the person who created Wolverine created the Lady Deathstrike, and that's what the stuff you do and say, I have a cool character I want to use, and I need to trim a whole lot of plot lines that don't work. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about throwing out all the stuff for all this other stuff that's not needed. Because X-Men needs, would need to be trimmed to be put into things, but they've already have. I don't know how many X-Men movie that has a ton of stuff from the X-Men comic books. So you have a template to say you can do it right. And at the same time, once comic books were big, that's how we got, the Superman Lives a script that got greenlit. That's what got the next Superman movie going. Because like, hey, Kevin Smith's a comic book guy. Let's get him to write Superman. And he writes Superman script. They're like, great, this is perfect. All right, and he did what the studio asked. He's done this joke 3 million times. You have the director come in, and you have Tim Burton say, all right, I have some ideas. Let's take this script, and I can't say it because he's going to say I can't say it, but he's just to throw it in the trash. That's a softer way to say it than how Kevin Smith said it. And let's do our own ideas. And I want to do him like the outsider, and we're going to put who's the name in there. We're going to have him all this other crazy nonsense in there. So you can do that, and then that thing didn't even get off the ground. So you had something that was working, you had the buzz, you had a comic book guy involved, and then you get a name director, and it goes south. You start seeing first signs of the new costume and the ideas, and they've just went south. So why?
I got to comment on that, though. I got to comment on that.
Look, there's a documentary on the failed thing. So what do you want to comment on it?
I gotta juke both of you guys on that. I gotta take out my blades and take them both. Why? Because
when you juke somebody, you're trying to sneak up someone and hurt them behind their back.
I'm doing it in front of you. In front.
Someone has a $150, you're gonna
I'm juking you guys both in the front. Look, if you ask me, the most comic book accurate MCU movie has been probably Captain America. Am I right? Right.
He wasn't
the most successful MCU movie has been Endgame, and that has not been the most comic book accurate movie of all time, right? You've had
others. We're not asking for it to be totally comic book accurate.
I'm just trying to say that we have to also be realistic that yes, some of these that are comic book accurate have been great and fantastic, but the most popular and real.
You're not saying what the people are saying here. You're saying something different.
You're making a point, and you're totally missing how your point doesn't work, because Endgame was part 2. That was part 2.
Okay? Well, part 1 and part 2.
That was part 2 of a 2-part story. And part 1, that actually hewed very closely to the comics. Okay, where they're trying to stop Thanos from doing what? Getting the Infinity Gauntlet, and then decimating the half of the universe. That's straight. That's idea straight from the comic.
Part 2 isn't.
All right.
Oh my goodness! It's part 2 of a movie that was a hit. It's part 2. The first movie was a hit. Everybody wanted to see it, and now you're saying, "Well, look, that was so successful." Well, gee, yeah. If part one is successful, you think people don't turn out for part two?
Okay, no, I wanted to add another thing to this. I want to add one other thing to it. You're
Just
saying it's
getting
not
up to
accurate. You're
date,
saying
guys.
it's not accurate. You're saying it's not accurate. At the same time, we've had a bunch of Avengers stories, right, where they're displaced, everything is screwed up, and then they go back in time and fix it.
Yes,
There's a Kurt Busiek, there's a Bill Mantlo did it in the Hulk.
yes,
There's
yes.
even the bit that was supposed to be in the West Coast Avengers West Coast, which had the same thing where what's the name? Scott Lang falls out. That was supposed to happen to the Black Knight because he was caught in a time stasis thing. So when the timeline was totally effed up, what's the name? The Black Knight would just fall out because he was in like a time thing who was it? And he would gather the heroes and figure all this stuff out. So it's like these are Avengers bits. Even though I've talked about some of the storyline and matches, some stuff from what was that thing? From the Voyager, the last episode of Voyager. The Avengers way, the action they take, that's something that's an Avenger convention of them. Everything is effed up. Let's go in. They gather the team and they fix it. That's an Avengers plot line. So whatever. We're not asking for that to be like the habit of all the aspects, every wacky. You said here in the other video complaining about the Goblin Queen. We're not asking for every comic book aspect to be in there. All the wacky things that are in there that didn't that go south, and it's like, nope.
I am just trying
We're
to
gonna hold you
out.
on the
I'm
bad
just trying.
storylines.
Just
You
trying
know, bad movies.
1 minute you want to talk about the Goblin King, you don't want that in, right? You want a comic accurate. They're giving you something, and you guys are pissing on it.
Wait,
And
I
this one you
can't.
want to talk
That's
about.
not what I'm
Oh,
asking.
But when
I'm
you
just
say
saying,
when you
gentlemen,
say
please.
comic accurate, that means we got to look at the bad stuff too. The stuff that we know is bad, we got to put that in there. You know, it's like, oh, it's got to be comic accurate. So the bad stories and the stuff that didn't work, we got to put that in there too.
I'm just
That
saying
makes sense.
there's some bad stuff that they did already on their own, right? And we took that. I'm just saying.
Really pushing it. You're really
Look,
pushing it today.
I guess we're gonna have to have a look. I agree with what you guys saying. It's very important that these writers should definitely take the time to read it. Okay, no one's disagreeing with that. But I'm saying at the same time, do you want to say, all right, all you writers are excluded, who have not read any comics, you're excluded from being picked up, and then you may lose
Nobody
talented
said
people
that.
who may not be able to
Nobody
do,
said that.
you know.
No one said that. And what's more, we're giving these guys a lot of credence. We're giving these guys a lot of credence because, like, hey, I'm still watching this, knowing that these guys are coming out and saying, hey, this stuff that you've read, this stuff that you know is pretty good. Well, we don't think we need to. We don't think we need to read it at all. Okay, we don't have to come over here and even open a comic book. Okay, or even even look at the cover too tight. We're just gonna go in here, and we're gonna make this up based, as we go along, and we're gonna give you what you want. We're gonna give you some flashy fights. Okay, we're gonna give you some fisty fights, and then when it's all over, everything is gonna be good. And if it's not, who cares? Okay, we don't really have any investment in this stuff anyway. So that's what it is. So we're not saying, hey, you've got to read a comic book in order to do this. We're saying, hey, we would recommend that you read a comic book if you want to do a good job, because this is an already established character. This is not new, and the world that they've created. Could you? I mean, this is like going to Tolkien. They would never go to Tolkien with the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit and just say, you know what? Nah, I'm not reading any. No, you have to read it. You have to read it. Same thing with Game of Thrones. You have to read it. Moby Dick. You have to read it. Even if you want to do something different, like I want to do it, but I'm gonna tell the story from Moby Dick's point of view. Well, then you've got to read the story in order to understand what his point of view would be. Okay, because that's where this character comes from. Comics, no respect.
Going to the Tolkien. It's like saying, all right, we're gonna take Lord of the Rings. Like this Hobbit aspect, the people aren't gonna buy this. We need to make them into a different type of being that's like a little bit taller, a little more heroic. Like you can't just always decide to throw things out for no good reason and then say, hey, we didn't even look at it. We were just like, it's basically saying we did all. They got a lot of. The hard part is,
I have one word for you: Wolverine.
What about Wolverine?
Not the Wolverine out of the comics.
What you know what Hugh Jackman said when he was on the first X-Men movie?
What did he
He
say?
said that they told him not to read the comic books, and then they said that Josh Whedon and other people were feeding him stuff, and the people in the Marvel office were feeding him stuff, which he wanted, and he was like using. That's how we got a bub in there. We got a bunch of things where we're getting some Wolverine bits that made it feel like the performance was Wolverine, right? That's what it was. The performance, how we got like his interaction with stuff, him being a reactor as a character, being able to react to the X-Men, that sort of thing. Those are the things that worked, right? But the height is the harder part. But he did, and at the same time, he was taking in information from people, giving them. He was saying that he looked at the comic books himself, even though they told him not to. So either way you want to go, either Josh Whedon or he read the comic books. But that's how we got closer to the Wolverine that everyone loved, because he was handsome and he had the bits of the nastiness of Wolverine, right? We had the hair trigger thing where he, Rogue comes in to wake him up and he just like, he cuts into her. That's a comic book aspect of Wolverine. You want to go to, I complain about the height? Yeah, I've complained about the height 3 million times. Yes, but at the same time, I'm using his words, not mine. His words, not mine.
All right, so look, we're going to wrap this up. So we're going to wrap this.
Wait a second. Oh, wait a second. Don't let that go. You had Hugh Jackman. Hugh Jackman was your example because he didn't fit the comic book in terms of height. And they were saying, no, that whole portrayal we got because he actually read the comic book. So he could give us the top portrayal. And your response to that is just to shuffle off to the next thing?
Thank
no,
you.
I think you should respond. I think you should respond to that.
Or recant.
I'm not recanting. There's more than that. Just the character himself was not exactly comic book accurate. Let's call it right now. You know what I'm trying to say? But we're not going to go into that because once again, we have a lot to cover.
So bogus.
We're going to, I just want to say, everybody, thank you for listening to this discussion. If you're here, please give us a thumbs up.
Don't act like it's that hard for people to go in and buy some comic books and take a run of these comic books and say, hey, you're doing this storyline, right? And that's the thing. We're doing this storyline with these characters. Read those. And if you're sitting there thinking it's mind-numbing and you want to leave the writer's room, then just leave. I'm pretty sure. And the thing
you got some goony goo cojones telling people to leave their job just because they didn't read the comic book. Okay?
Look, see, you could. I think you might have made a stronger argument. This is like an actor, and they're getting ready to play Hamlet, and then they ask the guy, "Hey, have you ever seen Hamlet before?" He's like, "Oh no, I don't watch anybody else's portrayal of Hamlet. So I'm not going to watch any of the other actors because I don't want them to influence how I'm going to approach the character." That's fair. That's fair. But then the guy's saying, well, look, have you ever read Hamlet? No, I've never read it. No, I've never read it. Well, but this is the character you're going to get ready to imbue. Don't you think you should read it so you have at least some understanding of how this character acts? Hamlet is is hundreds of years old. Don't you think you should? No, I don't got to read it. But then you look at what you brought with that example of Hugh Jackman. It's no different than playing Hamlet. Hey, did you read the comics so you at least have an understanding of the character? You don't necessarily have, and then that would be different than him saying, well, has anybody else been Wolverine? And do I got to act? No, I'm not going to act like this person, but I should act like the character from the story. I should do that. I think that's fair. And what they're saying over here is like, no, that's not important. Why? Because it's a comic book. And comic books are not considered literature. Comic books cannot give you higher level ideas, stories, themes, characterization, conflict. No, we don't get any of that from a comic book. We're going to have to bring it. We're going to have to bring it to the comic book. And it's that sort of hubris that has led us to have the last 2 years of slosh that they've been slinging out.
And that's the thing. We talked about, me and Mars talked about this the other day.
We don't bring me in. Don't be.
Yes, we did. What's the name? Because what went viral during Comic-Con? Matthew Vaughn said, hey, I saw this script for the X-Men, and I read it and said, oh, great, you got this storm scene in here, her in Africa. So, oh, no, we only put that in there because Hallie said she wouldn't do it if they didn't have like a real storm scene in there, her in Africa. And then they cut it. So it's like we have the actors asking for the characters for the audience to say, let's get to the root of the character, having her do something in connection to something that we've seen in the opening scene of when we first meet Storm is her in Africa, using her powers. And that's what the Halle Berry was asking for. And they said, we only use this as a swindle her to get her to say yes. So it's like, you can utilize it. You got people trying to get the comic book stuff in there, and they're still fighting against it. So, we just talked, that thing has been viral. Now everyone's, after complaining about Hallie all this time, now everyone's on their side saying, oh man, that's wrong. Oh yeah, who's that guy? I forget the guy who did The Last Stand, but it's just like, come on guys. they're trying to get the comic book stuff in there. It would have been not to say it would have helped the movie, but it would have been a great Storm scene to finally get a scene that she deserved.
That definitely would have been. Yes, I would have loved to have seen more of Storm. But getting back to the end of this, we're wrapping this sucker up. It was a very controversial topic. Clearly, people had a lot to say. Again, if you like what you heard, give us a thumbs up, comment, subscribe. Spinnerack.
Out.
You two are freaking.
I haven't stopped the show yet, okay? Oh, you want to go and ream us now? I'm keeping this bit on there.